Unscripted.
But the point is, we need to be on top of the game right from the beginning. The prime example I give is back. I can't remember. I think it was 2007. I mean, a long time ago, where
I won't make any jokes about about how you end nappies in.
So the legislation with regards to racial and religious hatred was being discussed to equalize the protections for racial communities and religious communities.
Mm-hmm.
So for those who are not maybe aware, racial communities, so if you're black, Jew or Sikh, then if someone insults you verbally because of your race or use abusive language towards you, then that's seen as a crime if it was likely that racial hatred would have been stirred up. Yeah. When it comes to religious communities, so Muslims, Hindus and Christians as well, if you can insult someone because of their religion, you can use abusive language towards someone because of the religion, it only becomes a crime when the intent
if you're able to prove
the intent, which is a very high threshold. So it's very difficult to prosecute someone on that. Back in 2007, that legislation was being kind of discussed. And I think the MCB were very heavily involved at that time to try and pass that legislation. Had that happened back in 2007, some of the hate crimes that we see on the streets, some of the the likes of Kate Hopkins and some of the articles that we see written in columns and newspapers, you wouldn't see them. They wouldn't have been allowed.
And arguably, maybe some of the attacks that people who get kind of almost radicalized by reading these myths and stereotypes and lies.
But the most important thing is, do you know by how many votes that legislation didn't pass?
How many?
By one vote.
What?
One vote. And the person who tabled the vote, tabled the bill in the first place, he himself didn't turn up on the day. It's ridiculous. Had he turned up, had one other person turned up, had the Muslim community known that there was such a critical piece of legislation.
So this is an example of Muslims listen, yeah? I feel like just...
I mean, we can point fingers. We were kids at the time.
Yeah, me too. Muslims, listen. Anyone who's saying don't vote, what does voting do, or what's the point of the system? Not going to change. This is an example of one vote being needed for a. I'm surprised. I'm almost kind of in disbelief. No offense, but I'm going to Google this later on.
But you don't trust the research of men.
One MP's vote away from such a massive seismic change in terms of protections for the Muslim community here.
Yeah. And somebody might say that, oh well, that's just one example, that's isolated incident. But we're seeing in comparing from the last election, what could have swung the vote, and you're seeing constituencies that are 20 votes, 100 votes.
In one place in Scotland, 2 votes.
Two votes. So these are not isolated incidents. These happen, and it's those 20 people who said my vote is not going to make a difference that would have made a difference.
Though that sentiment that your vote is not going to make a difference, right? I think there's a vested interest for those in power, those benefiting from the status quo, to encourage that sentiment spreading.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
Even amongst Muslims, if you see the real extremists, the real people who are subjected to attacks from Islamophobic, racist politicians and media outlets, tend to be those Muslims who are encouraging Muslims to gain power and influence get involved in those who are saying leave it, it's a kafir system, it's a batil system, leave it. They're actually
they're helping that.
They're helping the status quo exist and persist, right? Because that's like the ideal type of citizen, ideal type of almost a secularized kind of a pacified individual. They'll talk a lot. They'll say, "Oh, I don't like what you're doing in this country, that country, or foreign policy, whatever." But when it comes to the actual
time
crunch,
change,
how you can actually get rid of that MP that you don't like so much, you've been complaining about so much. They'll just they won't present a threat.
We didn't learn our lessons as a community from British colonized India. It was a very similar thing that had happened with the different parts of the Muslim community, and some parts of those Muslim communities saying, we'll stay quiet about this, and some of them actually being active about it, and the ones that stayed quiet actually made the situation worse.
Unscripted.